No mai haere mai, and welcome to Cult Chat, the podcast where we talk about coercion, control, and all things cultish. I'm Dr. Caroline Ansley. I'm a medical doctor. As a child, I lived at the Centrepoint community, a notorious cult in New Zealand, and now I run a website that advocates for the former children of the community.
I'm Liz Gregory, and I run the Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust, and I'm privileged to walk alongside people after leaving this group as they embark on their new lives.
And I'm Lindy Jacob. I'm a former member of the Exclusive Brethren, and I'm part of the Olive Leaf Network, a new initiative in Aotearoa to support leavers of high-demand religious groups. Come with us as we unpack the cult playbook. We'll be talking to experts and leavers of coercively controlling groups, and we will call for Kiwis to cult-proof their lives.
Come with us as we traverse the cultiverse.
A warning, this podcast contains references to subjects and discussions which may be difficult for some people to hear. Please take care of yourselves and your whānau when listening.
Welcome to Cult Chat. It's lovely to be back with you all. Hi, Liz and Lindy.
Hi.
Hey, Kaz.
Well, we're about to launch into the first of 3 episodes on leaving. Today we've got a guest. We'll be following this episode with a second guest, Liz Sallows, and then we'll be rounding out the whole thing with a third discussion on the whole experience of leaving. But now we'd like to introduce you to today's guest. Hello everyone. Today we're joined by Theophila Pratt. Theo shot to the attention of the New Zealand public last year through her involvement in the 3-part documentary Escaping Utopia, which aired in New Zealand in 2024 and can be viewed on TVNZ on demand. I think the most moving, most powerful, most shocking moment of the documentary was in the 3rd and final episode. The image of Theo cuddling her very young niece, born to her sister and her Indian husband in the Gloriavale commune over in India, in circumstances which most would consider hopeless and frightening. It was Theo's role in the documentary and her advocacy work for those women and children who are still living in appalling circumstances in India, which shot her to the attention of the New Zealand public, and that is how many will know you, Theo. However, we're not here to talk to Theo about the documentary. We're here to talk to Theo about what it was like leaving a cult, which was, for you, Theo, the experience of leaving Gloriavale. 9 years ago, you were forced to leave Gloriavale. At 18, having been utterly sheltered from the outside world and with no knowledge of how society operated, you were cast out of the only community you'd ever known. You were dropped at a bus stop and left to fend for yourself. We want to discuss with you today, together, what leaving is like, what we want the general public and our professional listeners to know and understand about it, and we want to give hope to those who are still living in coercively controlling cultic environments. Welcome to Cult Chat, Theo. It's lovely to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So good to have Theo here. Actually, Theo is also well known for another reason, because Theo's just launched her book. And I know that Theo's been on the West Coast recently, and she's had book launch, and she's been up and down the country holding these events. And I'm privileged to be the owner of several of Theo's books. And if you go to her website, and I'm going to throw it over to Theo now to tell us a little bit about where we can get our hands on Theo's book, how we can purchase it, and how we get a beautiful signed message from her in the front cover. So tell us about your book, Theo.
Yeah, so my book Unveiled came out earlier this year. And it's available on my website at theo.pratt.com for purchase, and I sign them and I'll post them out to everyone who orders. Yeah.
Wonderful. Are people able to get your book from other local bookstores or Kindle as well?
Yep, it's available on Kindle and through bookstores across New Zealand, and also through libraries as well.
Wonderful. Is it in the Greymouth Library?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
That would be wonderful, because you've just been in Greymouth, and of course that's right on the doorstep of Gloriavale. How was your book launch there last night?
Really well. A lot of women from Oranga Tamariki and police turned up, so it created quite a good conversation base for locals wanting to know how they can help. And yeah, it was really good discussion, and yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
for our
that's
overseas listener, Oranga Tamariki is our child welfare service, our ministerial organisation for safety for children who've had a lot of work in Gloriavale. So that's fabulous that they want to learn from your experience, Theo, and want to read your book. That's so exciting.
Yeah, it was a great
Yeah.
night. Good
Yeah.
discussion.
And are the sales going well?
Yeah, so far sales are going really well. It's been a bestseller for quite a few weeks. And I'll be at the Auckland Writers Festival in May.
It's
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah.
Wow.
that's
Well,
great, Theo.
we want to dig into some of the content of your book because so much of it really did such a beautiful job of describing that leaving experience. I don't think in my reading of other memoirs I've struck such a good detailed description of what it's like to leave. I think the general public knows and understands to some degree that Gloriavale's a cult. I think they understand that people live a life inside which is really different from the life that other New Zealanders live on the outside. While that might be the case, I don't think they've got any idea at all of how extraordinarily challenging it is for people to leave and then integrate into the world outside the cult. And your book takes us through those integration and assimilation challenges step by step. It beautifully articulates the difficulties present in even the smallest things. I remember reading your book as you talked about how you didn't know how to catch a plane where you were flying to, how to get your first phone, what to do with it, choosing food you might like in a supermarket, not understanding how to have a conversation with a stranger, how to get a benefit sorted, buying your first pair of jeans, wearing a bikini on the beach, all these really kind of normal experiences for the average person, but for you, you described this raw uncertainty as you navigated this new world. I would really love us to talk about that because it felt like you were so cruelly unprepared for this world that's normal to outsiders, but so abnormal to anyone inside the group you grew up in. Could you share some of this with our listeners, those first early challenges?
Yeah, I think with those early challenges, it was just the really small things like learning the days of the week and the months of the year, and trying to remember them every day for the first year of leaving. And it's the really small things like that you just don't realize take you a bit of time. And because you process everything so quickly, there's so much to get your head around. And you often make mistakes, and that's sometimes how you end up learning. But yeah, I think even for me, having my parents grown up outside of Gloriavale, in some ways that might have made it easier for me. But with the younger generation now leaving Gloriavale, with their parents being born into there, that's like another barrier, I think, for a lot of young people. So for me, I think having my parents sort of grown up on the outside and having that connection definitely helped the process a little bit. Yeah. I guess for me, going to Auckland where my mum grew up and I guess going to the places she would have been and going to where she grew up, it helped me connect to something outside of Gloriavale. But yeah, it's really those social norms and having conversations with strangers and learning how to introduce yourself. That's some of the biggest barriers when you first leave. Yeah.
That's something I loved about your book. It wasn't just a memoir, although you wove your story and might I say, you did it so respectfully. You really honoured and respected your family and your parents, even though there's been tragedy and terrible things have unfolded within your family. I just felt like it was done in such a beautiful way, for want of a better word. And for me, it wasn't just a memoir. Really, you've written a handbook. I think your book is great for people who are inside Gloriavale thinking of leaving because it gives them hope. I think it's a handbook for people who've left because specifically Gloriavale leavers, who can actually look back and reflect and realise there are so many similar experiences, but everyone in there also has their own very deeply personal, private experiences that they never shared, the inner life that gets hidden. Then it's for other people who've left cults because they can look at your experience and say, oh, wow, this is incredible. We've got there's the shared commonality of cult leavers. Then it's the handbook for the professional and the lady down the road, how she can help you. I just think it's a masterpiece, and it's a history lesson. It's been very, very well done. It's my number one book now. For anyone saying, what book do I read about Gloriavale? Here it is. It's a really very helpful, useful in all those ways. And I wondered for you, I guess it also had a healing, and you noted that healing cathartic exercise as well.
Yeah. I think through writing it, I had a lot of conversations with other people who had left Gloriavale and other sexual abuse survivors as well. And through that, you realise how you keep so much private, but then we're all sort of going through the same thing in different ways, of course, but it's relatable. I guess it helps other people feel that they're not alone in the journey. Yeah.
I think that's so important. Yeah, so well done to you. I read it with a pencil in hand. Within the first page, I was like, I'm just underlining and I'm circling and I'm writing notes in the side and I'm drawing on other people's experiences. It just, for me, someone who's worked alongside leavers for about 12 years, it was just so authentic. I love nothing more than particularly watching the young woman come out of Gloriavale. And I remember all of you as you came out in your early years, and I just sit there and think, in 2 or 3 years, you're going to be completely different people as you try to find, and your faces start shining, and you get your voice. And
yeah, and I think it's interesting because within Gloriavale, we had our voices in different ways, and then you come to the outside and you're in a whole different environment, and in some ways you lose them for a while until you start to be comfortable in who you are. And I think we've always had our voices, but it's feeling safe again in a new environment. That's probably made the biggest difference.
Theo, I confess I haven't read your book yet. I definitely will read it at some point. I kind of go around in circles a bit with engaging with memoirs and things of other cult leavers, because I don't know if you find this as well, but sometimes it's incredibly helpful, like it usually is incredibly helpful to, discover that commonality and all that kind of thing. But then sometimes as well, when it's kind of your own lived reality, sometimes it's just like, oh my gosh, too close to the bone. Like I can't engage with this. I remember a couple of years ago, probably about 5 years ago, I went on a real bender of reading memoirs. It was probably the first time I'd done it, like I think through my 20s, and that I didn't want to engage with other stories. And then for some reason, when I came into my early 30s, I had this real desire to go back and understand more of where I'd come from and why. And so I read as many memoirs as I could of people who had left the Exclusive Brethren in particular, and started trying to discover a bit more about my ancestry and all that too. But yeah, a couple of years ago, I tried to read the incredible book called Unfollowed by Megan Phelps Roper, who left the Westboro Baptist Church in America, which was incredibly cult-like. Have you read it?
I also couldn't finish it because it was very mirrored my life as well so much.
So painful. Yeah, I started reading. I was like, man, she's an amazing writer and such a gripping storyteller. But yeah, I remember I got to the chapters where she was leaving home and starting to describe things like packing her suitcase and having to say goodbye to family members that she knew she might not see again. I was just like shut. I cannot read this, and I couldn't bring myself to read it for another year or two, and I forced myself to finish it, but it was so painful to read it just because of how, I guess, evocatively she wrote, and I think I feel a bit scared about reading your book for the same reason. Is that I'm I'm going to have to make sure I'm really grounded, or read it with a friend or something like that, just to not feel like I'm revisiting, the ghosts of my past. But it sounds like it's an incredible book, and I'm really excited that it's out there, and especially here in New Zealand and for other leavers of other groups. Liz, I know you have told me in the past, Liz, that sometimes Gloriavale leavers wouldn't read a memoir by a Gloriavale leaver because they felt not ready to read something that was quite critical of their group, but they would read memoirs of other culty groups, and then the pennies would drop in a way that didn't feel as threatening. And I actually reckon that for me personally, as you guys know, I have a personal interest in the Exclusive Brethren, or the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, with that being my background, and it being, even though it's not an actual commune, it's got such high levels of control that are really similar. And so my hope is that lots of people in New Zealand in particular, Brethren, current members, will read your book as well, and will maybe be more open to reading it than, for example, Craig Hoyle is an ex-Exclusive Brethren, and he published his memoir, was it last year? And Excommunicated. And, you know, I think a lot of brethren probably won't read his book because it's seen as too wicked and too dangerous, and he's too much of a reprobate or something, whereas I think lots of them will probably be more open to reading your book. So, yeah, it does help to read others' experiences, doesn't it? Did you ever read anything, like, did you ever engage with others who had left before you left? I mean, 18's pretty young. You might not have had much opportunity or access to, but was that all part of your own leaving journey, or did that only come afterwards, like me?
I think it only came really afterwards, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you're speaking, I'm thinking, I think it's a reminder for people like that, their healing journeys and their journey after leaving a cult or even being in a cult is different for everyone. And it doesn't matter if you're not at the same place as your friends that leave. Every part of your journey is different, and wherever you're at's okay. And you might not be ready to read a book, but you'll be ready to do something else that your friend next to you's not ready to do. And I think it's just a good reminder to people not to rush the process, and there's no hurry because it's a lifelong journey. Yeah,
that is so true. It's very, very easy for one person to assume that what helped them heal is going to be someone else's pathway to healing or recovery, and it can get quite tricky sometimes, because some people can get quite even quite judgmental or condemning, like, you know, why are you doing that there? You know, you should be doing this. But yeah, everyone's pathway is so different. And I mean, I know a woman who's in her 70s and left as a teenager from the Exclusive Brethren, and it's taken her like 40, 50 years to start engaging with reading memoirs and doing things like that, and she's finding it incredible and incredibly helpful. But for her, you know, that she did not want to look back for decades, and that was her timeline that, you know, that she needed to take. So yeah.
And it's a bit pointless to try to make people to move before they are. I mean, I've had lots of experience of trying to talk to people who've left well before they're ready, and it's just a brick wall, really, and not helpful for them, not helpful for others, and just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. So the freedom of being able to explore it at your own pace is responsive to what's happening in your life, and often difficulties, unfortunately. You know, if people don't explore it in those first few years and they're able to get on with life, so to speak, sometimes that later on, say we're talking decades, sometimes it does come up because the strategies that they developed to manage life really, 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 really don't work. And that's when it becomes like, we really need to look at this stuff now. But, you know, everyone's journey is different, and that's the whole point, is that people come to it in their own way.
And it just reminds me that unless the person who's left actually realises there is help, there are resources, and they're at their fingertips, because often people coming out don't realise necessarily the level of trauma they're working through. And it's nice to be able to say, here are some things that have helped other people, but you have to leave that there for them to take a hold of. But what a different world we live in. The internet, it's just like there's so much information and resources that just wasn't here 10 or 15 years ago in the cult sphere. It's been an incredible explosion of it. Yeah, can I say, Lindy, Theo has some parts in her book that I was cracking up laughing over. Like, Theo's got a sense of humour. So as much as there's those moments of teary, there's like history. It's like, you know, it's kind of like the concept of the Bible, where there's all this different genre in this one stuffed book. It's just brilliant. But the laughter, I mean, the spitting in the food, Theo, I was literally laughing out loud. Now everyone needs to go and buy Theo's book. Tell us again the name of your book, Theo.
It's called Unveiled, Story of Surviving Gloriavale. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of humour within my book.
Oh, that's great.
So as I was listening to both you, Lindy, and Theo talking, there's this parallel going on in my brain, having read your book, Theo, as you talked in depth about leaving and then landing with this couple that were really supportive of you and helped you to kind of get launched to the next stage?
Yeah.
And they're really important. And I'm just thinking about what happened. The same thing happened with Lindy. You also had this couple who took you under their wings and let you live with them until you're ready to move on. And it just sort of struck me how, like, extraordinarily fortunate you both were in having these people who were able to kind of flex and absorb you into their homes and didn't know at all what was necessary to support a new leaver from a highly cloistered, closed, religiously harmful group. They didn't know what it was like, but they learned as they went along and were able to offer the supports that you needed in a loving and responsive way. And just a lot of people don't have that. That's the tragedy. And I guess I want to acknowledge those people in both of your lives who gave such an extraordinary support and love to you, and were that safe, like, nest, right? Like a nest to grow before you could step out again.
That's such a good point, Kaz. Those people are incredible. And I was just speaking with a cult leaver recently, and we were talking about support networks and things like that afterwards, and she was saying to me that she has an incredible therapist who she's meeting with extremely regularly, and she said very positive experience. They're amazing therapists, but we were talking about how there's this huge gap of just like friendship, people who are trusted and safe, but who you just might be able to, you wish you had someone you could call on the phone, because we were talking about how people often say to her, oh, ring Safe to Talk, or one of the helplines, and how she was like, well, actually I find it really unhelpful, because often the helplines are quite focused on trying to identify if you're suicidal or ask you questions about your medication, or this is just her experience. Those helplines do incredible work as well, so I'm not trying to downplay them. My point in sharing that is that she was just talking about kind of this gap that can be there for leavers, that it sounds like you and I both had, of just like genuine, trustworthy, safe human contact on like a daily basis.
Your average person.
Yeah, your average, like, hopefully kind and trustworthy person. And whether it's on a daily basis or whether it's someone you can call when you need to, or go for a coffee or a drink or something if you need to. But how there's sort of nowhere really where you can find those people. I mean, there's like meetup apps and stuff, right, that are friendship based, not dating based, but they're quite intimidating as well, because it's like complete strangers. And, as you described earlier, when you're still in a place of not even knowing really how to hold a conversation with a stranger, that in itself is like really overwhelming. So it's this funny sort of little gap. And I remember at the Bessel van der Kolk conference when he came to Christchurch a couple of years ago now, it might be, or last year, but he was talking there about healing from trauma and saying that like the number one thing that people need is to have safe relationships established, which I thought was incredible, because it wasn't medication or a therapist. Again, I'm not trying to diss the therapist, because they can be one aspect of the safe relationships, but it was this, he was talking more about this other thing of just having safe people to trust, and how hard, I just feel like that's probably one of the hardest things for cult leavers to find, is those safe people. And, as you said, Kaz, I feel so privileged and lucky, and I know I was looking at a couple of other options that were possibilities for me to go and live at, and I looked into some of those situations later, and they would have been terrible for me, and would have been possibly quite traumatizing and quite damaging as well, given the particular vulnerabilities that I had. They would have been terrible choices. So it's
I wonder if, Theo, have you ever thought what might have happened had you not landed where you landed and stayed where you stayed? Had you ever even, I guess it was hard for you to even imagine what it might have looked like.
Yeah, I think for me, going to Auckland and being with that couple was sort of the thing that got me to where I am now. And I think sometimes, because I was so distant from Gloriavale, although it was hard at the start, I think being in a place where I wasn't around other people, I had to learn really quickly. And I think that actually helped me quite a bit. But I think also we're talking about relationships. I think one of the first relationships is getting to know yourself again, and trusting your own self and your own body, and I guess, yeah, knowing who you are as well is a big part of it as well. Yeah.
You've been taught your whole life that your instincts are wrong and that your judgment is faulty or sinful. How do you learn to follow your gut that's been so suppressed for so long?
Yeah, slowly figuring out, but I think, really trusting yourself and decisions, and it can be just through like what clothes you like and being able to say, oh no, I don't think that suits me. It can be really small things, and being able to say, oh no, I don't like that food, and being able to say no in those sort of situations. And learning to say no is probably the biggest first sort of step in not getting to know yourself.
Practice small things that don't matter that much if you buy the wrong pair of jeans or eat the wrong food, but build confidence in your own judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And in the book, how you did speak about the importance of the role of your average person in assisting you, and friends and people who care, but also the importance of the therapy. And actually found your book really helpful from a therapeutic sense. I think leavers would find it useful because they spoke of things like PTSD and trauma and some of those experiences that therapists can actually help you unpack and give you deliberate strategies to deal with the fight, flight, and the reactions you have, and survival instincts coming out of a group like that. So, yeah, what did you find the most difficult about finding your therapist? I know you spoke about it in a book. Can you just share with us a little bit about that journey? It's part of your leaving journey, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was after I'd been to the police and they offered me therapy support. There wasn't a therapist that they didn't know what Gloriavale was in the first place. So they were really just trying to get to know what Gloriavale was, but it wasn't helpful to me. So I had to keep looking around for new people. And my first therapist, her role at the start was just helped me feel heard. So just listening. And that's sometimes the first step, just feeling heard. And then I guess building confidence to then maybe find someone else, or just building that confidence to start with, just being able to talk about things as well. Yeah.
It's amazing. Kaz, you were linked to Centrepoint, and Centrepoint Trust got closed down, and there has been some funding available, and Gloriavale leavers have benefited immensely from that fund and the counselling and the therapy that has been offered free. That this is therapy that they really didn't have the resources to pay for. And I can list dozens and dozens of people who have been helpfully impacted by that. And I'm not sure how our organisation, on a long-term basis like that, could support the large numbers that have benefited. But I know that it's been helpful. And one of the jobs we've had to do is also assist therapists. We've all run training sessions in different spheres because you're right, Theo, there's been a real big lack of understanding of cultic abuse, spiritual abuse. But I think there's reason to be hopeful for the next generation coming up. I think there's a whole different way. There's a really exciting professional network underway, and we just feel privileged that we've been able to be part of bringing some of that to New Zealand.
It probably bridges the gap till people are ready to speak, if they're sexual abuse survivors, to when they're ready to go to ACC and get the assessments that are done through that. Lots of people aren't ready for that step, but they're ready for counselling. So I think those sort of funds are really good for bridging that gap as well.
That's brilliant, and good you mentioned ACC, because we've been trying for quite a long time with the Gloriavale Leavers Trust to just make a connection and find out how to go through the ACC process easier. It has been for some people quite a journey to navigate it, but the good news is there's a fantastic advocacy group who are actually coming to Timaru, going to meet with us this month, May, and have a meeting with some leavers, and they are the navigators for ACC, and they're going to help us so we can help leavers navigate through all of that, because there's quite a lot on offer. And that's part of the leaving difficulty, isn't it? Like, so many organisations, who do you go to for help? like you don't just stumble across the stuff on a website and go, oh, that's for me. You actually rely on someone else telling you about these options, don't you?
Yeah, definitely.
So we were talking earlier about when you come out and you've got all these fairly urgent issues to solve and all this sort of instant culture shock, all the stuff you don't understand socially, and almost like you actually need a parent. I have to say the person that I was thinking of is the mother or father to a 15-year-old. That's what you needed, because the kind of stuff that you were asking questions about, I'm answering those questions from my 15-year-old all the time. So that's what you kind of needed when you came out. But as as things moved on and you started to navigate those identity issues where you're going, who am I? What do I want? What do I like? What do I believe? Where do I want to be? You know, like this sort of stuff that is actually often the work of a 15 or a 16-year-old. What was the next sort of stage of challenge for you as someone leaving, you know, practically or even sort of existentially, sort of internally? You know, what were the next sort of, once you'd navigated those early challenges, what were the next challenges?
I think for me, it took me it felt like a long time to find a job. And I think because I'd been used to being so busy in my everyday life in Gloriavale, all of a sudden I didn't have anything to do. And finding a job and navigating that space was really hard. Lucky for me, I went into study pretty quickly, and then got a job teacher aiding, and that sort of opened up my world. But I felt like I was going back to school myself because I didn't know the education system out in the everyday world in New Zealand. So that sort of helped me really grow as well.
And Theo, you've achieved a lot in your short time that you've been out. And what was it like standing on the stage on your graduation day, receiving your degree? Tell me about that.
It was pretty surreal. Like you want to say it was a dream come true, but you didn't know what that dream could be. So it wasn't really a dream, but it was, I guess, me being educated and standing up there and being proud of myself was like a huge achievement in itself. But no, it was pretty special. And I think building the friendships I did through university and coming out together was a really good achievement as well. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Actually, something in your book, you were just talking, Kaz, about what were the next challenges. You had a section in your book on the stages of grief. And I really appreciated again that your book had this sort of self-help manual for people and how those stages of grief, like others, they're not necessarily always in that order or they're not the same length of time between each stage, but there is a similarity of experience and how useful it was for you when you realised someone recognised that was what was happening to you. How important was it that you had people who were just able to say, oh, what you're experiencing is really common given your traumatic circumstances?
Yeah, I think how people letting me know that I wasn't alone in the journey really helped. And I think through the stage, like thinking of it in that way helped me break it down and not seem like such a big journey ahead of me, and that it was going to be in stages, and whatever stage I was at was okay. For me, a lot of working through things came from meeting people in groups through ACC groups, like other women, sexual abuse survivors, and having conversations with them really helped me go through things and break them down as well. And those friendships definitely helped me know that I wasn't alone as well. Yeah.
You were brave to go to those. And I loved at the end of your book, you actually honoured some of those women and some of the former Gloriavale members in the appendix. And that was just incredible for me to read. What an amazing way to contribute a body of knowledge to New Zealand society. You know, incredible. So tell me about your leaving, because leaving involves leaving a life that you knew, but it involves leaving a family, like your family. And you've left, but you're now recreating links back with your family still in Gloriavale. It's a very difficult thing to do. And I admire your family in there who have allowed you and opened their hearts to you, because technically they are going against what they had been told their whole lives was the right thing to do. What's it been like navigating that part of the leaving?
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. And I think a lot of it's come through, I guess, tragedy and a lot of bad things happening, but through that it's allowed relationships and conversations to happen. So just simple things like my mum getting a phone and things like that, it's opened up conversations and allowed access to just getting, I guess, forming a relationship with my mum again. And then through that, her, I guess, me being able to build a little bit of relationship with my siblings still in there, but as well as my nieces and nephews, which I guess for me, writing my book was a big part of it. And knowing that they're at the age I was when I left, and taking that into consideration. But yeah, it's really only been in the last sort of 3 to 4 years that that's happened. And isolation from your family's a big thing, but I think, yeah, you meet people outside and they become family as well.
Nice.
Because, my understanding of Gloriavale is that, there's, no contact with outsiders for the run-of-the-mill Gloriavale member. So when you say you've been able to establish some contact with your mum and siblings, what does that look like? Like, are they allowed unchaperoned, uncontrolled, unmonitored contact with you of their own choice? I'm like struggling to understand how that works. And also, like you said, it's in the last 3 or 4 years. It's been in the last couple of years in particular that you've become more outspoken and gone on the documentary and now done this book. And that, like, does that not equate to you being viewed as much more of a dangerous kind of threat, that you might be going to be influencing them out, and therefore that they would be really disallowing any communication with you? Or how is it that communications opened up at the same time as you being more of a threat to Gloriavale?
I think through police involvement.
Wow, that's not very easy. Okay.
No, wow. So it's through police involvement, and I think Gloriavale stepping back a bit, and it's been through police involvement with my younger sister and through that sort of thing that allowed my mum to be able to keep a phone and keep.
Wow. So you're talking about, like, legal external authorities putting pressure on to allow some communication pathways.
Yeah, and I think in terms of me being more public and outspoken, that in some ways that's created barriers for relationships with my siblings that are in Gloriavale. But for me, it's opened up conversations with my mum, because it's for her, it's almost her feeling heard as well, and the truth being told. And she always felt, she won't say like, you did such a good job with that, but she'll be like, you're telling the truth. And I think that's been, and I think you just I think she won't, because of the conscious thing of like that it's going against Gloriavale, saying that it's the truth is sort of her way of, cheering me on.
That must be an incredible gift, Theo, to have your mother acknowledging in the way that she can that some of the choices that you've made and some of the truths that you're telling. That's a huge gift for you to receive. I'm chuffed for you.
Yes. Yeah. And Lindy, don't forget the impact of the cell phone tower, which was from advocacy from various groups, including OT and police. The role of outsiders and other organisations who send phones into Gloriavale with data and money on them. Don't forget that the court cases have created a huge amount of pressure on Gloriavale, where they make promises, the Royal Commission, no, we don't do that anymore. We're giving over decision-making to parents now, and some parents are actually saying, we're allowed to keep a little bit of contact with our, say, teenage children who are leaving. So there's actually Gloriavale leaders are losing control, and there are a pile of people in there who are driving through the cracks and just saying, well, I'm going to get myself a car and I'm going to do this and I'm off just to go down to Timaru and stay with my grandchildren. And the leaders are feeling quite powerless because they really are actually losing control.
That is fascinating.
Not feeling sorry for them.
And although it's come from a lot of good, I think it's still acknowledging that a lot of, not bad things, but a lot of mental health and a lot of things have come from that. So suicides, and I think just acknowledging the young people that have lost their lives through that journey, that's created awareness in its own way. Unfortunately, through that, and I think really acknowledging that, I think that's made Gloriavale realise it's worth keeping in contact with your kids if it prevents suicide.
Yeah, and the contact needs to be positive contact. If you can maintain a positive contact, if you've left and you can maintain positive contact with your family inside, it's actually good for both parties. But if it's toxic contact, if it's the party inside Gloriavale putting pressure on the one who's left to come back or live under certain conditions or in the same control and manipulation, it's actually detrimental to mental health, and it leaves young people in a that's something that 10 years ago, the young ones leaving, there was no choice. It was hard, cut off, done. Now there's this really grey area where each one's being treated a little bit differently. And there's a lot of devastation currently right now with young people who are negotiating this relationship with parents inside. And Gloriavale saying, we let people talk to their children, and the kids are bawling themselves to sleep because of the things their parents are saying to them. So you're right, creates other issues.
In your book, Theo, you actually describe, and it's really stuck with me, your attempts early to go back to the community, and you talked about how you really wanted to sort of prove to the people in the community that you could succeed and that not all the people who had left were evil. But it was quite disappointing and heartbreaking, and it re-triggered your trauma, knocked you off your feet a bit, and you wrote, talking about Gloriavale afterwards, you said, I saw it through a completely different lens. It wasn't the safe haven from the world that it had been made out to be my whole childhood. Instead, it was a prison that I'd lived in for my first 18 years. And now you're talking about, since then, obviously, the more positive experiences of connecting with people. So how is the sort of returning, kind of these going back, not actually going back always physically, but definitely each time you retain a connection or return to a connection with a member of your family, you are in some ways going back, even if it's not a physical return. But how has that changed you over the years as you become more confident and grounded in your value in the outside world? You're a different person each time you re-engage and go back.
Yeah, and I think it's, you really do, even when you're driving over to the coast or anything like that, you do have to mentally prepare yourself, because often you can find yourself slipping back into the shoes of for me, the girl that I was in Gloriavale. Even driving to Gloriavale, I still feel really sick in my stomach. And I think now, obviously, there's lots of changes, but it's even more, in some ways, even more frustrating, because you know the leaders are only making the change because they have to. It's not deep down, and it's not because they're actually sorry. And in some ways, it's almost worse. But yeah, it can be even more frustrating. And even now with the police are pulling back a lot of their support through funding changes, and it can be quite frustrating. Is it going to be a repeated cycle of, like, a lot of work's been done and a lot of progress has been made, but now with funding changes with police, is it going to just all go down the drain? All the hard work the police on the coast have put into it, it's not really being acknowledged now as a need for young people and the support to Gloriavale to continue, and that can be really frustrating. And although change has happened, it's not change that's come because it's wanted.
No, and it's not won yet. It's a war in many ways, isn't it? It's not secure. The wins and the gains are nowhere near secure yet. And so that's actually a call and an encouragement that what you're doing, Theo, with the band of other people still standing up, because it can get tiring being, on there, is that actually it still needs to continue. And what's great is different people come to the fore at different times of their journey, and some take a step back for a bit, and then they are ahead leading the charge. And I still see a lot of fire and passion in people, which is really great, because that's what fuels the longevity that's required for this cult. Has gone for 50 years. It was never going to be a 1 year done and dusted. It's all, have a few newspaper articles, the whole country will come running, let's sort Gloriavale out. Wow. I mean, how much faith have we lost in institutions over this time? But look who's still around. Leavers are speaking up. The lawyers who are getting involved, they're not going anywhere. There's more to come. There are great teams still working as well in law enforcement and child protection. And I honestly have a belief that none of that third generation are going to remain at Gloriavale. They're leaving at the moment, one every 3 to 4 weeks. That's been 15 leave in the last year, singles between 16 and 24. There'll be another one next month. There'll be another one the month after that. And you're right, the resourcing's can be an issue, but we're encouraged that there are some great social service organisations that we're connected with across New Zealand, including the West Coast, who are really stepping up to the mark, and volunteers, just amazing people who are taking people into their homes, caring for them. And, this is a whole community-wide, New Zealand-wide issue. So your book has continued to keep this in the public face. And it comes, I know, at a risk of you've left Gloriavale, you want to become the new you. It's that difficulty of living in a public eye, a group that's gone so public. Everyone has a view and belief on Gloriavale that you're going to be stereotyped, and yet you're trying to make a new life for yourself. That's a hard line for you, is it, to walk?
I mean, it is, but I think every conversation that it starts, it's worth it. And if it comes from people being curious and asking questions, every conversation's worth it. And the more people that email their local MPs and fighting in their own way, it's worth it. And I think you just get to the point where you think you've got to think the bigger picture and think long term as well. Yeah.
So Theo, I've got a question. Actually, it's for both you and Lindy. There's bound to be some people inside cults, including Gloriavale, listening to this right now and thinking about leaving and afraid to take the next steps or what those first steps are. I know that, Lindy, you at the Olive Leaf Network have this great booklet all about leaving, which is filled with really practical things to do, like getting your documents together and getting some photos and all stuff that's really practical to get in line in advance of leaving. It'd be really good to have a little korero about that preparation of leaving, and if anyone's listening right now, what things they could think about in advance to reduce some of that extraordinary stress that you feel when suddenly you're out.
Yeah, I think my advice would be you're not alone, and we're like everyone's cheering you on in their own way, and I guess thinking each day, day by day, but also thinking about the bigger picture and knowing that in 5 years' time you're going to be a complete different person. But be okay. You will be okay because there's so many people ready to support you.
Oh, well, yes, I would encourage people to go to the Olive Leaf Network website and go to the resources tab, and right at the top there is a little booklet called Thinking of Leaving, which, there's, I can't remember how many off the top of my head, but about 10 or 12 different kind of, quite comprehensive categories that people can go through. And I am a big fan of preparation, mentally and physically. Just anecdotally, the people who get kicked out with short notice and little mental preparation seem to struggle a whole lot more. Yeah, whereas if the change is one that you've chosen and you've had time to prepare for, then it's might still be hard, but you're going to be a lot more prepared and have the right things in your backpack to kind of help you jump out of that plane and unfold something of a parachute instead of being caught completely unawares. But, I don't know, Kaz, what are you asking for? Some real specific practical thing?
No, anything, just the sort of things you've just said, actually.
Well, it's every, it's every area.
The practical things are something you can read in the booklet, which I'm also advertising your booklet, by the way. I guess there's some other sort of internal rearranging in your head that are more psychological.
Well, I think that, the booklet talks about some of that, like one of the first ones listed is thinking about your motives for leaving. And that's an important thing to think about because those are the things that are going to get completely shaken. I don't know if you found this, Theo, but the resistance from loved ones as well as other members of the group you're in is so immense that you've got to have such a strong inner core, something incredibly powerful motivating you, and kind of, your why.
Yeah.
To help hold you against those storms, to help you to stick to that path. And if it is possible to be able to name them, some people can't. It's too hard. They just know, I need to get out, and it's they're not yet at a place where they can even name it. But if you can get to a place where you can clearly name your why, whatever your reasons are, I've met leavers for who a wide variety of reasons. One young man was really clear. He was just like, I want to have fun. I want to have more fun than I can have in the exclusive brethren. And that was his, number one thing. And that was, for him, it was connected to a core life value that he believed that life was about having as much fun as you could. And he's, really fun-loving guy. Good on him. That's that for him. He was like, it's my highest purpose, and I can't live aligned with that purpose in the brethren, so I've got to leave. And for others, it's tied in with their spirituality or their
safety, child safety, family safety.
Yeah, physical safety, their family safety. Yeah, but knowing your why and your motivations, I feel like that gets to, that's kind of that inner core that you really need to have to help you to survive the transition.
Mm-hmm. As we begin to look towards the end of our conversation with Theo, I wondered whether it might be worth me reading a quote on page 1 of your book, Theo, that I ran up and got my pencil and underlined. And you wrote, "In Gloriavale, we lived for dying." And it really jumped out at me because I've just spent the last 2 or 3 months writing. It will end up being a blog post. I haven't finished crafting it yet, but about the concept of life and death in Gloriavale and in cults being really close, much closer really than I would say your average view in society. And the way you wrote that, in Gloriavale we live for dying, and it was especially in reflection of this devastating suicides that had occurred in Gloriavale. And I've written it to try and I've gone to other leavers. I've said, help me understand this concept better, because death is sort of like a friend in there. There's this living you do that's looking forward to dying, and it's all very close and quite muddled. But I want to ask you another question. In Gloriavale, we live for dying. But Theo, out here, why are you living? Can we have what's the hope in living? Why leave?
Yeah, I think, you really live in survival mode, and you live for dying in Gloriavale. And I think out here you live for connection with other people. You live for your hobbies. You live for what your values are, and I guess really drawing on what your strengths are as a person and bringing that to the world. And I think so many people within controlled environments have so much to bring to the world and for others. And I think that's what you live for, because everyone has value and everyone has something to bring to the world. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that for me has been one of the most devastating things, watching these incredible people inside Gloriavale have their gifts and their talents and their personalities squashed into the ground, beaten around metaphorically and physically. They're brilliant. There's such creativity, there's such intelligence, there's such humor. I mean, literally some of the most humorous, funniest people I've had the privilege of spending time with. And, there's so much, they've got so much to offer. And yet in there they were just caged and weren't even allowed to offer it within their group. I find that devastating. So for me, it's just the greatest pleasure on earth watching and following people's journey and reading your book, which I'm sure we've advertised already, but please go and get your copy of Unveiled. Go to Theo's website, theo.pratt.com, order one from her so you get a beautiful message. Otherwise, head down to your local bookstore or get online and Kindle, because it's an incredible read, and I really want to honour you for what you've done and the work you're doing, and your inner strength to stand up. I mean, these guys were bullies. Gloriavale, you wrote it in your book, a system of bullying, and you're standing there saying, no more. Let's expose it. Let's stand up. Let's deal with wrongdoing. I'm not ashamed. What was your quote? The cult. It was on page 2. You spoke about the fact that we didn't choose the cult life. The cult life chose us. But guess what? You chose to get out. Actually, you did have options. And man, they were difficult choices to make, but there are options. No one is so entrapped that they actually can't get out. So well done to you for proving you can.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and sharing a bit of yourself with us today, Theo, and the hope that you, I think, can provide to other people in Gloriavale and in different groups, like Lindy was saying. Is there anything else that you want to share with us before we wrap up?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me, and thank you for the conversations you continue to have through doing your podcast.
Great. Okay, before we go, we just want to mention a few things that are going on in the Cultiverse right now. We just want to draw attention to the Religious Trauma Network, who have an annual online event coming up in June 19th to the 21st, where both Lindy and I will be participating in that. You can find out about that at www.thereligiostraumacollective.com. Another one is the Decult Fund and Film Night, which is here in Christchurch on Friday the 13th of June. That's an event that will be hosted by the people who put on the Decult conference. It's an in-person event, and you can find out about that at decult.net. They have an events page.
And just point out that it's the airing of the film. So they took footage throughout that weekend. A film crew has compiled that. So it's going to be a doco film screening night. And Kaz, I have a funny feeling that both you and I didn't quite make our time in front of the camera. We kept promising we were going to go back, and then I ran around in the last 5 minutes of the conference to find the film crew, and that actually packed up, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. So
well, the three of us will be there. So if anyone wants to come and talk to us, we would love to see you at that night on the 13th of June. Look at the decult.net page for information about that. So we hope there's been something for you in today's episode which might help you to cult-proof your life. Please keep listening to more episodes of Cult Chat on Plains Media, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can go to our Cult Chat YouTube channel. Please tell your friends about the show and share or leave a review about us on the Facebook page that we run, or you can email us on info@cultchat.org.nz. I want to thank Plains Media for their support to all our dedicated listeners. We've really enjoyed having Theo today, and we want to say goodbye and until next time.
See you later.
Thanks, Theo.
Thank you. Bye.
If anything in today's episode was difficult or upsetting for you and you would like to talk to somebody, we encourage our New Zealand listeners to free call or text 1737 for support from a trained counsellor. Or you might like to visit the resources section of the Olive Leaf Network website, where you can find a range of organisations and resources that might be able to support you. We would also like to remind you that the views and thoughts and opinions that have been expressed in this program are the speakers alone, and Cult Chat does not necessarily endorse or share them.